Hi, I'm Stella Wuttke, and in this video I will talk about how stress can impact our work life and really our whole life. So, when we are growing up, we are often told stories where people, animals, whoever is our hero in this story, how they live happily ever after, at least at the end. So there is a state, there is a place where we go, and then we live happily ever after. Well, I don't think that that's really true. So, in my opinion, life is change, and that's in line with different philosophies. One is Vedic philosophies or yoga philosophy. So life is change. We always have to adjust. There's always something happening within us, around us, to the loved ones of us. And it is a matter of how well we can adjust to that. So it can be the professional life, the personal life, and we are actually built that our body and mind is adjusting all the time. That can be from our eyes adjusting when we go into the dark room. In the dark room, our eyes will adjust after a while. We will be able to see better. We may go into a room which is warmer, then our body will adjust. And a lot of these adjustments we are not aware of. So our body and mind really adjust all the time to the given situation. And that works pretty well most of the times. But then there is a time when there might be too much of adjustment where we cannot really keep up anymore with it. And this is also where we start talking about stress or stressful situations. A stressor in general is anything that requires us to adjust or to change. Now, when these adjustments are working well and we can easily adjust to them, then we are talking about eustress or eustress. However, if it is getting too much for us and it's piling up, then we are talking about distress. So it's a matter of, do we feel in power in a situation, in power of our life, or do we start feeling overwhelmed? Now, stressors, basically things which we have to adjust to, can be in general positive or negative things. So when we talk about negative things, it can be the death of a loved one as an extreme example. It can be illness, a divorce. But it can also be positive things like moving, or neutral, really. It can be positive or negative. Then job insecurity. But also when we are starting a new job, or we are going on a vacation, or even our own wedding. So all things that require us to change add up. For example, when we are already feeling really stressed, we're getting everything done before vacation, and then we are actually going on vacation, are at the vacation, we think, oh, then everything will be great. But if we are already stressed and then being at a different location, eating different foods, maybe having a different culture, that's also requiring us to adjust. And so this is how a vacation can sometimes become stressful, because we're not really aware of what's going on in the background, and that really vacation and all these changes are stressors. Now, when are we going into distress? So when are we going into overwhelm? This really requires or depends on how often we have to adjust, how long these stressors are occurring. For example, when a loved one gets sick and we take care of that person, is it a few days, is it a few months, or is it even a few years? How intense is that? Is that person requiring us to maybe, just cook once a day, or is it 24 hours, 24/7? And how many of these stressors are in our life? Is it just 1, 2, 3, 10, and so on? So this all determines how stressed we are and how stressed we feel, if we are still on top of things or becoming overwhelmed. It's also important, if we have time for ourselves, for self-care, can we recover from these stressful events in between, or is that possible? Do we have good coping mechanisms and social support? And depending on that, stress will affect our life more or less. Now, there is a kind of a danger of distress over time. And this basically means when we have a stress level that we can't really cope well anymore. So we are talking about getting out of balance in these situations. And that's when our brain, our body, our mind cannot keep up with the performance, with the high performance anymore. And we will, in these situations, experience symptoms. And they can kind of come, slowly and then increase over time. It may be harder to relax. We may become hypervigilant. We are easier irritated. So that means that already little things can trigger us, so that we are getting anxious or angry depending on our nature. We may are easier to an emotional outburst. It can also, so stress over time can also show that our sleeping pattern changes. We may experience sleeping difficulties. It can go all the way to insomnia. It's really a gray zone. So it's going from white to all the way to black. And white might be when we don't feel overwhelmed and stressed over at all. And then black would be when stress becomes clinical. That could be an anxiety disorder, that could be PTSD, so post-traumatic stress disorder, and so on. So there's a lot in between. But stress over time can lead to these different symptoms. It can reduce the functionality of the digestive tract. We may gain weight. It can decrease the heart rate variability. That's how our heart is functioning, and that's an indicator on our life expectancies. And eventually we will, over time, have a higher risk for physical and mental illnesses. And and overall there is a decrease of performance. On a physiological basis, this affects our autonomic nervous system. Our autonomic nervous system has basically two parts, the parasympathetic and the sympathetic. Now, while the sympathetic is activated when we are stressed, that means that we are basically getting activated to fight or to flight. And on the other hand, we have the parasympathetic. The parasympathetic innervates all our organs. It's important for restoring processes, for rest and digest, is the saying, and sort of really rebalancing, energizing again, and so on after performance. And ideally, we are flexible, so our autonomic nervous system can go both ways, from parasympathetic to sympathetic, depending on your needs. However, when we are stressed over time, our nervous system can get stuck in a more sympathetic mode. So that means we lose this flexibility, and we are always more active, more alert, more hypervigilant. We cannot relax because we are in this more activated mode, and so on. Now, in extreme cases, that can lead to permanent changes in our brain software, so how our brain actually is working. And different networks in the brain are affected by that. And leave me a note in the comments if you want me to go into more detail about these networks in future videos. Networks in general are just areas in the brain which work together for a specific purpose. For example, the saliency networks, a network basically lets us know or makes us aware of an important situation or stimulus in our life which we need to attend to. Now, when we are stressed, then after a while, over time, this network adjusts, and it's always just brain in general trying to serve us best, but it can adapt to in a way that any additional stressor is right away categorized as threatening or annoying and so on. So if we are relaxed, then things happen and we just say okay, no problem. But when we are when our saliency network adjusts, and it can be just a little thing and it's perceived as a big threat. Now, another network which may be adjusted is the default mode network, and we are talking here about how aware we are in a situation. Sometimes we are on autopilot, for example, when we are driving and we are thinking about other things, so we're going kind of inwardly, but we are not aware outside of the outside situation so much. Then when this default mode network adjusts to long-term stress, then we react, then rather act upon a situation. So we are triggered and react right away, and there's not much cognitive thinking about it. It's just a kind of relatively low-level reaction to a situation. It can be it can lead to a lowered self-awareness and endless loop thinking. So we are starting worrying, thinking, rethinking, and cannot really let go, which then, of course, can affect our sleeping and so on and so on. Our affective network is So our emotional network is affected, so we are more sensitive, easily triggered, you're not emotionally balanced, and also our executive network can be impaired or affected. So we are not that well thinking analytically anymore. So our reasoning is not as good, and so on. So stress really can have a huge impact on our well-being, and also how our brain is functioning, how our whole body is functioning, and it can lead to different impairments. So eventually, going down the road, our emotional and processing and response can be different due to stress. Um, our memory retrieval can be affected, our attention span, working memory, that's how well we can process given situations to find a solution, and so on, our executive functioning, decision making, stress response is affected, and eventually stress, and especially when it goes into a clinical field, can also have a comorbidity with depression. Now, what are solutions? Solutions when we feel stressed and overwhelmed. It's important that we re-establish this flexibility of body and mind. And for that, we have to choose the right activities to balance our work life and balance our everyday life. And these activities are really different. It really depends on what our work life is, and work life can be being a manager at home with a number of kids, juggling everything and really being the super CEO at home. It can be the work, whatever we have, whatever we do. And so what I mean by that is, for example, myself, in my past, I was a researcher at the university, so I did a lot of analytical thinking, calculating, writing, and so on. So for me, balance was going out, climbing, being in nature, but also meditation, hatha yoga. I loved cooking. That was for me relaxing, balancing, rejuvenating, re energizing. Now, if you, for example, take care of your kids the whole day, for you it might be important that after that you have time for yourself where you can be alone. You may not want to be in a hatha yoga class with 20 other people. You may just want to go out for a nature walk and be alone. Maybe your work is has very little social interaction, then social interaction will be important for you as a balance. So with that in mind, examples for you getting in balance again or rebalancing from a stressful life can be hatha yoga, meditation, qigong, tai chi. It can be nature walks, cooking, other creative activities. It can be something more physical, like going to the gym or any sort of sport. It can be dancing. It can be socializing or also the other way around, being alone by yourself. And another important point is really to putting these activities on your schedule as well. Schedule time for yourself, schedule time for your self-care. With that, I hope this is helpful for you, and if you liked this video, please like it and subscribe it. Let me know in the comments what you would like to hear more about, and thank you for listening. Goodbye.